Hi, my name is Vig, and this is another episode of Quick Draw, where I talk about small interesting things that I find in film. I'm absolutely ecstatic to discuss today's subject because this person is one of the great artists that I've been waiting to talk about since I first started this channel out. And since the person has a movie coming out around the corner, I figured now was as good a time as any to kick it all off. Ladies and gentlemen, Addison Rae. And I guess some guy named Clint Eastwood, too. For this video, I'd like to talk about the last film the legendary man with no name starred in, 2018's The Mule. But in celebration of the filmmaker releasing his latest film, Cry Macho, shortly at 91 years old, I'm doing something very special on the channel and unveiling a new quick draw analysis video every week for the next 3 weeks after this one. Call it the month of Eastwood on the channel. So if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more so you don't miss out on some really exciting stuff to come. Of all the great Eastwood films to discuss, why in God's name am I entertaining you with some thoughts on The Mule, a far from perfect film with a bevy of flaws like an uneven screenplay that takes many leaps to jump from plot point to plot point, shoddy acting from a few different sources, and just outright weird moments that feel unnecessary and out of place for the story that's being told.
It's the most dangerous 5 minutes of my life, man, being pulled over by law enforcement.
No más respira, man, por favor, respira.
I don't speak Spanish.
Truth is, for all these reasons, and perhaps a few more not mentioned, The Mule is not exactly a great film. And yet at the same time, it is a great film, because at the end of the day, none of that other stuff really matters if something within the experience of watching it resonates with you on a deep level. And that certainly is the case here for me. Can you guess what that something might be? Threesomes. No, it's actually just Clint Eastwood, his performance to be precise. Now I know what y'all are thinking, what is so worthwhile about watching this 88-year-old dinosaur act in a fairly plain looking film with a sloppily stitched together plot? And I might agree with you that when taken only at face value, there's not a whole lot to digest here. Eastwood does a fine job with the role, but nothing overtly transcendent that is compelling enough to dedicate an entire YouTube analysis towards. But when dealing with an actor like Eastwood, a literal icon of cinema who's maintained a distinguished place in our culture as a symbol of American masculinity, and weird politics too, I guess, it's quite impossible to separate and isolate one lone performance from what he's done throughout the rest of his career. I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by that later. Back in my Grand Budapest video, I introduced the notion of an actor's inherent quality, essentially the natural strength in performance that an actor possesses distilled to its simplest form. It's Marlon Brando's abrasive sexuality, Jack Nicholson's naughty playfulness, Ralph Fiennes' intense gaze, the subject of that video, which you should check out if you haven't already. It's a good one. Eastwood, of course, has one that's instantly recognizable as well. It's pretty much embodied right here in the cover of this box set. This stare is so iconic that it's probably the first thing you thought of when I mentioned his name at the start of this video. For decade after decade after decade, the crinkled eyes of this piercing glare have had one singular meaning. You pissed off the wrong guy, and you are going to get your ass. But that's where The Mule is so interesting, because in this film we get those same confrontational moments that we've seen time and time again, where people toy with and mess around with his character. But this time around, Eastwood's reaction to all of that is shockingly one of resignation and defeat. Take this scene for example. How does Eastwood react to a meathead goon who aggressively talks back at him?
Ask for your fucking advice, Grandpa?
Or here, where he's confronted by the cartel for missing his shipment.
Ill will if you're whatever goes on here. Just go ahead. Fucking do what you have to do.
I don't mean to say the man's invincible in every film he's been in. Quite the opposite, actually. He's never shied away from showing vulnerability by being beaten, roughhoused, and left for dead more than a handful of times. But I don't think we've ever seen him be submissive and, quite frankly, unable to fight back after antagonization. The signature glare that we're so used to seeing, even in as recent of a film as Gran Torino, is absent, replaced with sad frailty. Mentally, he's as familiar as ever, with witty wisecracks and trademark charm showered around in abundance. But that imposing physicality, which was once reliably one of his greatest strengths, has dissipated. The barking dog has lost his bite. Forgive me if I sound overly sentimental, but one of the draws of watching The Mule is to see Eastwood, the man who we've grown up with for literal generations, come to grips with the fact that he's not that guy anymore, the renegade badass that he's been his entire life. And witnessing his innate understanding of his own physical mortality for really the first time in his entire career is an incredibly moving thing to experience. Director Steven Soderbergh once said when discussing the emotional effect of using old film clips of Terrence Stamp in his film The Limey, that in cinema, you can follow actors over a long period. You can really see the accumulation of someone's life experience. And I think that's what makes The Mule so powerful. Viewed in isolation, it's nothing particularly special. A simple film about an old man who realizes the value of family far too late in his life. But because we have so many fond memories and have formed such an intimate relationship with the man by literally watching him age on screen for decades, Eastwood's mere appearance makes it impossible to separate this lone performance from the rest. He brings with him the stories of all his previous films in his eyes, his face, and uses them to create an important new chapter of his life's work that drastically adds depth and context to what he's already done. And because of that, the impact of seeing the bruiser, the renegade, the vigilante that we grew up with and loved, aging into someone who simply can't and doesn't want to fight back anymore, well, the impact hits pretty damn hard. But what he can still do is move us with an emotional performance and showcase that glint in his eye that shines ever so brightly.